Everyone is telling you the Toronto market is crashing. You see the headlines about ghost condos and the massive inventory spike on the Toronto Real Estate Board charts. But here's the truth. Nobody has a crystal ball for 2026. What I do have is the data from the 10 plus years on the ground here in Toronto. If I were putting my own money into a Toronto property today, I wouldn't be timing the bottom. I'd be following a very specific, low risk blueprint that most people are ignoring because they're too busy doom scrolling. Today, I'm showing you exactly how to play the new Toronto market without getting burned. This isn't 2021 anymore. Remember when you had to view a house for 5 minutes, then put in a firm offer, 300,000 over asking? That era is dead. And quite frankly, that's great. Right now, the city of Toronto is seeing some of the highest inventory levels we've had in years, especially in the condo sector. But don't let the doom and gloom YouTube thumbnails fool you. While everyone is waiting for an additional 20, 30, 40% crash, that likely isn't coming for freehold homes. They're missing the fact that we finally have something we haven't had in many years: time. My first piece of advice for you is to take your time. You actually have the power to walk through a house 2 to 3 times before putting an offer. You can actually put an offer with conditions on financing and inspection. This shift from a frenzied market to a buyer's market is your biggest advantage. Now, before you open up a real estate app, we need to talk about the cost of owning in Toronto. If you're buying in the city, you're paying 2 land transfer taxes, one to Ontario and one to the city. On a $1.2 million home, that is roughly $40,000 in land transfer taxes. This is why my 2026 strategy revolves around the 7-year rule. If you can't see yourself living in that house or condo for at least 7 years, do not buy. The transaction costs in Toronto are way too high. If you're buying for the long haul, these short-term price fluctuations don't matter. Your home is a forced savings account and a place to live first, an investment second. Sit down with a mortgage broker. Don't just get pre-approval. Ask, what is my monthly payment if rates hold? What happens to those payments if the interest rates drop? You need to be comfortable at current market rates. So what's the move? If you want to be the person who looks back in 5 years and says, I'm glad I bought then, here's your positive action plan. Niche down to the neighborhood. Stop looking at Toronto as one market. South Etobicoke is doing something different than North York, doing something different than Scarborough, doing something different than Riverdale. Pick 2 to 3 neighborhoods. Learn their sold prices and local market dynamics. Look at the months of inventory for your specific neighborhood. Months of inventory is active listings divided by the number of sales in that specific pocket. For example, if the neighborhood you're looking at has 300 active listings and 100, the months of inventory is 3, which means if no new listings come to market, it will take 3 months to sell all the active listings. Under 4 months of inventory is considered to be a seller's market. 4 to 6, balanced market, and over 6 is buyer's territory. You can take your time, ask for conditions, and negotiate. The stale listing advantage. Another thing to look at is homes that have been on the market for above the neighborhood average or have been relisted multiple times. In Toronto, a stale listing is a goldmine. These sellers are tired and they are much more likely to accept a conditional offer or a lower price. For example, if a house has been sitting for 40 days, while the average in the area is 25 days to get a property sold, the market is saying that property is overpriced. And this is a property that is good to negotiate on price and terms. The slush fund. Don't just save for the down payment and closing costs. Toronto houses are old, They might have knob and tube or old clay pipes, have extra capital tucked away for that surprise repair or upgrades you want to complete. Some defects are caught via home inspection. However, there will be issues that will come up over time as you live in the house. Once you live in a house for a year, going through the 4 seasons, you'll have a good understanding of the home and how it functions and the repairs that it needs. This is a market buyers have been yearning for many years, a market where buyers have time to choose, put conditional offers, negotiate, and take time to complete their due diligence. If your employment is secure and you are in a good financial position, this is your time if you have a long-term perspective. Okay, so let's go through the buyer's 4-item checklist that I've created. And again, you can download this in the link below. The first section is financial preparation when it comes to buying a house or a condo or a semi-detached or a detached property. It's all the same. The first thing to do is to get a mortgage qualification. There's a difference between mortgage pre-approval and mortgage pre-qualification. Pre-approval is strictly a rate hold. However, a pre-qualification, when you sit down with a mortgage broker or your lender, is they fully underwrite your financing. The only missing piece of the puzzle would be the property. So the purchase price, the property taxes, and then if it's a condo, then obviously the condo fees that they need to incorporate into their calculation. So get pre-qualified. The second item under finances is to maximize government incentives if you are a first-time home buyer. So for first-time home buyers, there is the first home savings account, which allows each first-time home buyer to put in $8,000 per year into that account, up to $40,000 total contribution over the 5 years. And again, that grows tax-free and they can be withdrawn for the down payments. You have the home buyers plan RSP withdrawal, which is up to $60,000 per first-time home buyer. And then there's a $10,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers. That is something you should verify with a lawyer if you are a first-time home buyer to make sure you can qualify for the 10K claim on your taxes. The third part of finances are the double land transfer taxes in Toronto. So again, we got two, one to the city, one to the province. And for first-time home buyers, you can get a rebate of up to a total of $8,475 between the city as well as the province. And then the last piece of finances, getting your finances prepared, is closing costs. So account for 3 to 4% of the purchase price, which would include your land transfer taxes for the city, the province, your legal fees. There will be some adjustments to be made at closing. So budget around 3 to 4% of your purchase price. The second item on the home buyer checklist is the property search, house versus condo. So when it comes to houses, the home inspection is critical. So there are 5 major items you should be focused on. The envelope. So you have the foundation of the property to make sure there's no leaks, nothing coming in water-wise. The roof, it's not leaking. And then plumbing, electrical, and HVAC, the big 3 mechanicals. That's a critical piece of the puzzle. Everything else on the inside, for the most part, could be renovated, upgraded, updated. But those 5 items, and again, the roof, the foundation, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC are critical pieces of the house, whether it's detached or semi-detached. Now, property surveys, some have them, some don't in the city. It's really a mixed bag, and it's good to have, but it's not really a deal breaker because the title insurance that your lawyer will provide at the time of purchase will protect you from survey errors and a lot of disputes with detached and semi-detached properties in the city are about fence lines and encroachment of where do they fall on whose property line. But again, the title insurance provided by the lawyer will protect you from any potential issues down the line. A couple more items to consider when it comes to a house is the tree protection zone. If there's a large tree, where does that fall? Because the larger the tree, the bigger the diameter, and there's restrictions on what you can do and cannot do. And again, it's got to protect the tree and its roots. So that's something to keep in mind. And then last but not least, parking. So this is where you got to watch out, and your agent should be double checking, as well as the lawyer, if the legal front pad license through the city, is it legal? Is there a mutual drive? Street permit parking is available. So that's something to consider, because that does add and take away value from the property. On a personal note, when I bought my first house over 20 years ago, and I wasn't licensed back then, the property came with 2 parking pads in front of the house. And then something we didn't know, and we found out the hard way, 30 days after we moved in, we got a letter from the city saying, oh, your second spot is illegal. You have, I can't remember the time frame back then, but it was, 30 or 60 days to remove the second parking pad and put landscaping. So again, that could be an issue, and your agent as well as your lawyer should verify and double check that the parking is legal for the property that you buy, because that is part of the value of the house you are buying. Now, when it comes to condos, the status certificate is pretty much standard, and that's a condition that's put in when someone is buying a condo, and that goes to the lawyer to review to make sure there's no special assessments, there's no lawsuits against the corporation, and that is something critical that is completed by the lawyer. Another thing that the lawyer looks at is the reserve fund. It is mandatory in Ontario per the Condo Act that buildings have specific amounts in the reserve to allocate monies for future repairs, such as roof, mechanicals, garage, all that type of stuff. So that is another item that the lawyer would look into, is are there adequate funds in the reserve fund to protect you? Because otherwise, if you move into a building that is underfunded, you could be at a risk of getting special assessments down the line. For example, if the building has to replace windows or fix the elevator, some big cost items, or do roof repairs, and the monies are not available in the reserve funds, the condo board would issue special assessments to each condo owner where they have to cut a check for those repairs. So that is something your lawyer would look into. Third item for condos is what's included in the maintenance fees. So water, heat, hydro. Older buildings have cable and internet included, but again, it's good to know what's included and not included, and then I'll budget for 3 to 5% of annual increase if it's an established building. If you're buying into a new building, the first few years, the maintenance fees do jump up rapidly because they have to build up the reserve funds per the Condo Act requirements. So that is something to be aware of, is the age of the building and the reserve fund that they have established so far. The third item on the home buyer's checklist is, taxes when it comes to Toronto. So as of April 1st, 2020, the City of Toronto Council has approved the luxury land transfer tax for properties over 3 million. So that is something to be aware of. And again, your lawyer will have those numbers available for you. The vacant home tax is another thing to be aware of. So every year, every homeowner in the City of Toronto, whether it's a house, a condo, a semi-detached, a townhome, they have to file to the city declaring the status of the property. So if you've lived in it, you'd have to file the declaration on an annual basis saying that you live in the property and it's not vacant, to avoid a vacant home tax that is 3% of the assessed property value. So that's something to be aware of as you get into home ownership. Third item when it comes to taxes, the foreign buyers ban is still in, and that was extended recently up till January 1st, 2027. And last but not least, property taxes. Those have been going up rapidly the last few years, 9%, 6%, and 7% over the last year. So a 23% increase over the 3-year period. And we'll have to see what those property taxes will be increased by on an annual basis. But again, budgeting 4 to 5, possibly 6% a year is reasonable in the City of Toronto. The fourth item on the home buyer's checklist is the offer and closing process. So when it comes to buying a home, irrelevant whether it's a house or a condo, is having liquid funds. Now, if you have funds in registered accounts such as RSPs or TFSAs, or if you're a first home buyer in the FHSA, it'll take a few business days to transfer those funds into your checking account. So when you're actively looking for a property, it's good to have approximately 5% of your budgeted purchase price liquid, which means you have quick access to those funds to issue a bank draft once you have an accepted offer. Because the rules in Ontario is within 24 hours of an accepted offer, the buyer has to provide a bank draft, the deposit, to the listing brokerage for the purchase of that specific property. So keep that in mind, having liquid funds when you're in an active state of home search. The second item, the offer process, is conditions. Depending on the property, it could be financing, inspection, status certificate, and the length of that period fluctuates. But I would say anywhere from 3 business days up to 7 business days, depending on the condition. And that's something to take into account when you're putting an offer as a buyer, especially in this market conditions where buyers can negotiate and have time to do their due diligence. Now, another thing that I like to do for my buyer clients is a final walkthrough within the last few days right before closing. And this is where we go into the property, take a look to make sure that everything is working, there are no leaks, nothing is damaged. And if there are any issues, we have enough time to address it with the seller, and at the same time, get the lawyers involved if necessary, if those issues are not resolved. But this way, the buyer is protected, because once they get the keys, they become owners, and then they have to deal with whatever condition the house is in. Last but not least, utilities and insurance. And that's something you got to make sure is you switch all over the hydro, Enbridge gas, water utilities, notify the city of if you're paying an annual parking pad fee. There's all those things to take into account as you become a homeowner. Here are your 3 actionable strategies. 1, download my buyer's checklist. I put the link in the description below. It has every point we've talked about today. 2, stop looking at Toronto as one market. Pick 2 neighborhoods and truly study them. Set your walkaway number. There is one thing that overrides all the math I just gave you: emotion. When you've lost 3 bidding wars, or you've lost on 3 houses and you find the one, you're going to want to throw the checklist out the window and overpay. Don't do it. Emotional buyers are the ones who regret their purchases down the line. Buy based on numbers, facts, and the 7-year rule we talked about in this video. If you want a real estate agent that uses this exact data-driven approach to negotiate for you, click on the link in the description below to book a strategy call. If you're new here, I help people navigate the Toronto real estate market. If you want the latest news and honest advice, hit the subscribe and like buttons so this information can get to more people. If you want help with your home selling or buying journey, reach out via the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.